My voice. I appreciate this opportunity to share my story. Um, it's an honor to be able to share my story tonight. My family has been in San Francisco for 3 generations. My grandparents were attracted here during the migration period, worked on the shipyards and whatnot. And our families went through some interesting twists and turns. Unfortunately, both of my parents were addicted to heroin. And as a result, my life in early childhood was between 2 very unique households. One, my grandparents were very religious in a very stable household, and the other, my parents who were addicts and lived in the Sunnydale housing projects. My grandfather was a preacher at the St. Mark Institutionary Missionary Baptist Church on Valencia. And my grandmother, she pretty much tried to give me all that she could, guidance and encouragement, wanted me to always stay in school. But however, I did not always have the fortune to be with them and have that support. The other world that I knew with my parents was pretty difficult. For most of my life that I can remember, my mom and dad were addicted to heroin. I spent most of my upbringing in the Sunnydale housing projects, as I had mentioned before. It was a place that we called home. My mom used prostitution. She used forgery and other means, illegal means, to support her addiction, as well as my father. My uncles, my father's brothers, were also pimps, and the perception that I had was access to success meant access to a lot of cash and drugs. And I remember my first time doing drugs with my dad. He sat down and smoked a joint with me when I was probably 7 years old. The neighborhood where I grew up, because my parents did have an income at one point and started working for Muni, I was often pressured and bullied for money and drugs in my neighborhood. So I could say that I did not feel safe in my neighborhood in the Sunnydale housing projects. At a very young age, I started carrying weapons to so-called protect myself. I was an only child. And eventually I brought one of those weapons to school, which led to my first encounter with the juvenile justice system, and also would be the beginning, I didn't know at that time, of a long history with the justice system. And so my mom and dad were in and out of incarceration due to weapons and charges and forgery, which I mentioned. And most times my grandparents would come and get me when it was available, when it was an opportunity for them to bring me into their home and to try to give me a safe, stable life. I had my own interactions within the jail system, and it's a pretty overwhelming story, so I'll try to summarize it. It happens over a 15-year period in my life. I became a drug abuser, the member of a gang in the Potrero Hill neighborhood, and a perpetrator of violent crimes. I've seen 7 prison convictions for carrying weapons and possession for sale of drugs. I was shot 2 times in violent incidents and still have a bullet lodged in my body to this very day. However, there is a bright light to my prison experience. I was exposed to many programs, which eventually turned my life around, including Roads to Recovery at the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, and Resolve to Stop the Violence Project, which I'm currently employed with right now, working with youth 18 to 25 to interrupt the cycle of violence. It was there that I finally got the mental support and therapy that I needed in my life. It was difficult. My family relationship was difficult and very unstable. I was exposed to violence, particularly my mom's temper, when she was not able to meet her physical dependencies on the heroin, on the drug heroin. And at those times I would experience the greatest extents of verbal abuse and abuse, physical abuse, sometimes resulting in broken bones and even unconsciousness. When I reflect back to when I was a little boy, I felt very alone. I have questions that come to mind. Why is it that anyone didn't see my suffering in the school system? Why is it that anyone didn't pull me aside and say, hey, what's going on, little man? Things of that nature. I felt like if I would have had someone maybe to talk to at that point, that it could have made a big difference in my life. When I brought weapons to school, Maybe someone could have simply asked, "Are you okay? Do you feel safe? Why would you bring a weapon to school?" I've always been a pretty polite kind of guy, but it was like an inconsistency for me to be carrying weapons of that nature. So it may have made a difference if someone would have picked up on that. And so I didn't feel engaged in my community. I did not feel engaged in my school. Many of my peers now, as I look back, are incarcerated for things like murder. Many of them, friends that I have died on the streets, street crime. So that was the track that I saw, and those were the guys who were in the classrooms that I was in at that time. And so for Goal A, I did not live in a safe and nurturing environment. It was very chaotic and unstable for me. Earlier, I mentioned that I grew up in the Sunnydale housing projects, and though we were not homeless, there were infestation of pests. Right, there were roaches. That was very common, and even when we tried to fumigate our apartment, because the other apartments were not fumigated, then they would very quickly come back. So that wasn't always an ongoing problem. We had some access to food stamps and welfare, and that was kind of nice, to have some food in the house from time to time. Even though my parents' addiction, there was like feast or famine. There was times that we had meals, and then there were times where I kind of had to fend for myself and figure out how I would be able to sustain myself. But I did stay with my grandparents off and on. I do have memories of wonderful cooked meals. My grandmother's a great cook. She's from Louisiana. And so, yeah, she has that Cajun background with food. And I actually appreciated having the opportunity to feel safe and have a stable environment, know that someone cared when I came home. There was a curfew there. And even though, like a child may, want to eat gummy bears for dinner every night, and that's something that they may want to do, but we know that that's not healthy. So I did appreciate being with my parents like every child would want to be, but at the same time, it was really not healthy for me at that time. So now reflecting on Goal C, I'm not sure, but I think my mom used drugs with me while I was pregnant. I'm pretty sure. My birth was very difficult. I was born with pneumonia, spots on my lungs, spiral meningitis, and I think a lot of it was due to her not getting prenatal care and possibly drug usage. Let me see. So moving along, my parents were eventually on 3rd Street. There was a program which gave out, I think it was maybe $15 or $20 for people to be tested for the HIV, for the disease. And they, at that point, did get tested and found out that they were HIV positive. And I think that was in the early 90s that both of my parents told me that they were, in fact, infected with the HIV AIDS. So that was very difficult for me, that they found out in that particular way, kind of, let me know in a very kind of direct way. And I think that at that point, there was depression in our family. There was depression for me. I don't remember them getting any counseling. I certainly did not get any counseling. And I could say that we were, in a sense, in survival mode. Overall, we suffered as a family, I think, from depression. My mom, I believe, she told me she used because she was covering up related troubles in her past childhood, possible molestation. I think that because of her addiction and behaviors that she learned, she was never quite fully able to tell that story, but continued to suffer from it. At one point, I can remember feeling very suicidal. And at one point, being involved in gangs to me was possibly a hope and desire for me that someone would put an end to my suffering. I really can honestly say that. So regarding having access to caring adults, I didn't really have anyone to look up to at that particular time. There was no one that looked like me that I was able to really admire. The closest things were teachers, yet I didn't connect with anyone specifically because, they weren't a lot of African American teachers when I was coming up in the Sunnydale area. The leaders I saw were pimps and drug dealers that looked like me in the projects, and the things that they done were they used violence and manipulation as a means of getting their needs met. As a kid, I don't remember participating in any preschool or early care programs. However, when it came to school, I do remember that I loved to read, and in fact, it was one of the things that I found myself to be good at, and often got reprimanded by some of my early school teachers for helping other kids and not doing my own work. But with my grandparents in my life, I went through various private schools. They did do their best to try to supplement what was going on in my parents' life. Jumped around from various public schools in San Francisco. My attendance was inconsistent, good when I was staying with my grandparents. And my grandparents pretty much stepped into my life when my parents were incarcerated, as I said before. I did have an opportunity to attend Reardon High School, where I graduated with my grandparents' support. Also went on to continue to City College.